The following program does not have a normal intro because I was really too busy smoothing other things over to get it done. So, Ori? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Fire Program. I'm your host, Joe Neerman, a.k.a. Good Lawgic. This evening, as promised, I'm going to slip into a British accent all friggin' night long. So, as promised, I said, hey, there's a guy I've been talking to who has like a whole background. Like he's really looked into Klaus Schwab. I'm thinking about bringing him on tomorrow. And totally forgot about it until someone who's like always hooking me up with Destiny was like, hey, were you going to bring Johnny Vedmore on? Was that the guy you were talking about bringing on last night? I was like, oh my God, that was the guy. Oh my God. Oh my God. And I told him, like, what's sad is I told him like last week, I was like, oh yeah, so I'll just like reach out to you and we'll book something next week and we'll book something. So like, I have to give him props. And the reason I have to give him props is I bring him in here, Mr. Johnny Vedmore. The reason I give him props is like he said, like he's like, his schedule's pretty flexible. So like at 8:20, I was like, when you say flexible, how flexible are you? And he's like, super fly. And I'm like, all right, Jimmy Snuka, let's get it going. Super fly. Let's see. Are you good to go in an hour and a half? And he's like, yeah, totally. Let's do it. And it's 3 a.m. where he is. So I want to say welcome to the show, Johnny. Thank you so much for stopping by, especially on such short notice. And yeah, how you doing this fine evening, I guess, morning in Limeytown?
Wow, what a nice intro. Yeah. It's funny how the things work, isn't it? It just goes zoom, 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 and everything's going on at the moment. So everybody wants to talk about everything, and it gets to be honest, it's been a big blur to me. It's been a quick, long 2024. It's like gone really quick. All of a sudden, everything's like kicking off. Everybody's like active. There's like a sudden opening up of stuff. So I'm in a different place. I'm pretty good. Over here, Britain's all right. It's a bit cold, bit
right.
cold.
Yeah, it's kind of cold here in the New York region as well. I noticed there's a lot of different British accents, like 1,000 different British accents, and you don't have the posh accent, right? You have more of the Guy Ritchie, like character in a Guy Ritchie film type of accent. Like it's like, oh yeah, I totally understand what he just said as I think it through like 5 seconds later. But
I'm Welsh. I'm from Wales. I'm from the land of King Arthur. So yeah, I'm from South Wales. So if you went up to North Wales, they'd speak even more like this. And same with down in the valleys. Most of my countrymen speak like that. And then down in London, where they speak a bit like this. And then you get the Scouts where you're like, kid, how's it going? Are you right? And then you get like down to Wolverhampton and stuff in the Black Country, where everybody talks like this all the time. And I grew up with people from all over Britain, man. I know all the accents, I know all the people. They're all individuals, all separate tribes, lots of genetics in Britain, all stuck. 1,500 years ago, everything got locked in genetically. All the tribes stayed exactly where they are. And if you test the genetics now, you discover they've never moved. They've not moved anywhere.
Really
interesting place. Yeah.
They're all still the Jutes and the Celts. From like
kind of
the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes.
Yeah. Now, what you got is and I can explain this pretty easy and quick.
There we go.
In Wales, you've got South Wales, where I'm from, is slightly genetics is kind of mixed with South Pembrokeshire. Then you got South Pembrokeshire, North Pembrokeshire. They have a border where the genetics haven't mixed in all of that time. They just don't get on with each other that well to do it, and they sit on the same border. You got North Wales as a separate genetics, and the Marshall Lords, the Marshall lands, which are like what touches England. Then down in the south, you got the Cornish and the Devonian, completely separate genetics, still lying exactly where the border is still today. And then you've got the Normans who have come up. Of course, they were the invading North French army that came in and basically owned the whole of the southeast, like basically cut along, kind of like affected by what was originally the Watling Street, which was the street that was the first road to be built by Rome through Britain, kind of like that sort of area. But then up north, you've got the North Humbers, South Humbers, you've got the Lancs, you've got the Picts, you've got Orkneys, Irish, Shetlands, you've got Scots Irish, all sorts of different tribes. The people of the Elmet.
What
They're
I'm
all
taking from this is that you're genetically the whitest white man ever. Basically, that's what
I'm a ginger. I'm a ginger Celtic white man, and that's kind of like Celtic is kind of like a mix
the
of all
whitest.
things.
It's like if you tried dancing or playing basketball, like it would just be like everyone would just be like, oh, yeah, see there's the genetics.
I don't. Yeah, okay. The basketball maybe, even though I was all right because I could get under people. I was quite short when I was young, but I don't know. I don't know. I could dance. I could dance.
Can you? You can dance? You're a dancer?
Better than most. I would say I'm top 50% rather than bottom 50%. That's got to be something.
Yeah.
I flick off a move every now and again. I got it going on.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't want to do it now. I won't do it now.
No, I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm not going to I brought you in here for your investigative reporting, not for your dance skills. But
good.
That's
good.
So I'm curious how you ended up falling into becoming an investigative reporter.
Yeah, man, it was a hard road. Basically, I had a hard life.
In the 2.5 minute version.
Yeah. Hard life. Come to an end of a hard life in 2015, where I was just like, I want to end it. Don't like life anymore. And it was a choice between like doing something that I was scared about doing, which was becoming an investigative journalist and looking into things, or it was death. It was kind of like, it was the point in the road where I was so depressed.
Don't use the word. Don't use the word.
Yeah. But I was there.
The word on YouTube is self-deletion.
Yeah, I know.
Self-deletion.
Yeah. Wow. There you go. Yeah. I was there. I went a different route. I went psychedelics, 3 months, came out the other side, was like, right, I'm going to investigate everybody and I don't care anymore about anything. Let's do it. Let's rock and roll. Got a job, like basically working in a hotel, doing normal stuff, and just sat behind the desk, like typing, researching. Did the first article that was big, that was about Theresa May's father and how he worked with a serial killer called John Bodkin Adams, who killed over 130 people in his time. Had them all sign them into his will as well, into their will, so he got all of their money afterwards. Really amazing story, hidden from history. The prime minister who was about the woman who was about to be prime minister, that was her father working alongside him during the cover-up. And so I kind of like then went into the Epstein case eventually. Did an article about a woman called Nicole Junkermann in 2019, who's an extremely interesting
Who is she? Who's Nicole Junkermann?
Nicole Junkermann is one of the most important people to study if you want to understand quite who Epstein is. I'll
give you so we're on the same page. I'll give you a little bit what my background is in Epstein. Okay, I literally knew nothing about him until the Ghislaine Maxwell trial started. And I live like an hour by mass transit from the courthouse where she was tried, and I was like. And like after the first day of trial, I was like, a lot of people are into this whole Ghislaine Maxwell thing. I said to the wife, I was like, I think I'm going to start like covering it. Like, I think I'm going to start like going down there and reporting on it. And I started going there every day, and I covered the trial. And I was sitting in a viewing room, and I got to watch the entire trial. Like, and that was a trial which no one could see because in federal courthouse they don't allow cameras here. And you couldn't record anything. I'd sit there taking notes, and every day by lunch and afterwards, I would give a little update as to like what happened, during the previous 3 to 4 hours. And so I basically sat through there until the verdict. And a lot of the time, it's funny. It's like the reporters there, many of them don't know very much about the law. So I was explaining to them the legal arguments that were being made, and I was like, "This is pretty cool. Like, I'm helping sculpt like basically how this story is going out to the world, because like I'm basically sitting here by every break giving them like an explanation as to like what the argument from the prosecution defense was and what the judge is weighing."
What you were explaining there is only really being realized by people now. I mean, you saw that through the Epstein file drops. It's like people are like, oh my God, all of these. But the people like you reported those out. And I wrote articles like the Epstein 101 articles. I did research for One Nation Under Blackmail and stuff. So like concentrating on the Epstein's stuff, when you were like concentrating on that was just like a feed for me to be like people like me to be ahead of the game.
Yeah.
And now the people are just catching up. So it's an interesting process. That's the process that's proper journalism.
But I never heard about Junkermann, so that's why I want you to tell me about
Nicole Junkermann, most beautiful woman around. Very suspicious, 1995. She was an elite model alongside people like Naomi Campbell and the top models of the day. She went to University of Monaco, also studied business.
Oh,
at Harvard.
she was witness number 2. They didn't give us her name. They didn't give us her name.
She would know.
She's
British,
right?
In court.
She's British, right?
No. She's in a German dash.
Oh, okay.
But she's much more complicated.
She met Colleen in
England.
No.
She went to with Epstein by plane on the Lolita Express. Let me explain how I got to Junkermann.
You go.
Let me explain how I got to Junkermann.
You go.
So basically, I went through the Epstein flight manifest and I color coded it all, and I kind of looked for anomalies. And she was one of only 2 who flew along with Epstein with 0 entourage. So no Ghislaine Maxwell, no Sarah Keller, no rest of the entourage, no Bill Clinton, no this, that, the other. Not Epstein used his plane for many different reasons. One of them was to bring people to him, but mostly when he flew on, they flew on with his entourage. This was rare. Nicole Junkermann stood out. I investigated her. She turned out to be one of the most interesting Mossad-connected women that you've ever met. Started off as a model. And the flight they went on was on the 31st of August 2002, and they came to Britain. So that made me go, that's my home territory. I should find out what they were doing. What was Jeffrey Epstein and Nicole Junkermann doing coming from Paris to Birmingham Airport, a weird airport to go? Well, it turned out, I found out they went to Foxcote House, which was Les Wexner and Abigail Wexner's house, and they met 2 sitting US senators a month before the Iraq War. And Epstein walked in to meet the senators on the night with Nicole Junkermann on one arm and a brunette on the other one. So you can imagine what they were being used for. And then later on, I find her in pictures with Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, with Brad Pitt, with loads of different people. Also, she's invested in loads of companies. She's involved in FIFA corruption. She's involved in tax fraud. It's amazing. It's amazing. They created a front company called Infront Sports and Media, even put front in the title, and they bought the FIFA rights by installing Philip Blatter, who was Sepp Blatter, the head of FIFA's nephew, as the head of the company. And basically, they sold the rights, which were worth hundreds of millions. And they did the same. They later got watered down, but they did the same in the Asian market. And then she created another business, and she became an angel investor. She's now invested in SpaceX. She's the reason for the satellite array up in the sky. I mean, they bought that off her because that is her company. Grok, really important part of AI. That is one of her companies. Oakwin, I got into understanding that she had got into the Health Tech Advisory Board in the UK under Matt Hancock, who was Minister for Health in the UK, and she's in a company called Carbine 911 at this time. And Carbine 911 is Ehud Barak's company. The chairman of the board at the time I discovered it was Nicole Junkermann, Ehud Barak, the 10th Prime Minister of Israel, head of Mossad, guy who runs into
Ehud Barak.
Okay. I say Ehud. I do apologize. Ehud Barak. You should. I've heard people call. Today I was listening to a read through and someone was saying Umad. They couldn't dare pronounce it, so they just said something else.
It's not. I speak Hebrew. I'll tell you. In Hebrew, it's Ehud. It's not Ehud.
Ehud.
No, there is. I mean, there is. Look, I understand. There's a letter. There are 2 letters in Hebrew, which are like a ches and a chaf, which have a ch type of sound, which a lot of Americans and Europeans struggle with because it's not common to English. But what I'm saying is, even in Hebrew, it's not those letters. It's an H type of sound. It's Ehud.
Yeah.
Is how
Okay.
it's
Okay.
yeah.
Ehud. Well, it was Nicole Junkermann on the board of Carbine 911. It was Nicole Junkermann, Ehud Barak, Pinchas Bukris, who's of course head of IDF at one point, extremely important guy. These Amir Elikai and this other guy Alex Dizengov, and those two were like working for the Prime Minister's Office for Cybersecurity, and it was a cybersecurity company that was private and was looking to basically get contracts in America where they would get in between the caller and 911. So they do all of the job for 911, swallow up all your data at the same time. You call 911, but you get through to Carbine 911, and Carbine 911 decide how to respond by using all of the smart technology around in all of the cars and all of the phones and everything like this. And they do up a brilliant advert for it, and it's basically a Unit 8200 intelligence front company. And as soon as I exposed that, as soon as I showed everybody what was going on, they had to change their entire board. Every board member came off straight away, and they replaced it with Michael Chertoff, the neocon who works for the Alliance for Secure and Democracy, and runs out of the German Marshall Fund in Harvard. It's just unbelievable the sort of reach these people had, and they had come into the NHS as well. She had got involved in the Health Tech Advisory Board. That was home ground, so it was good territory to go and look into her. And what I discovered is that she did Carbine 911. Jeffrey Epstein was also invested in that alongside Peter Thiel as well. So there was a really fantastic way to enter onto the Epstein scene, and that was I think that was really just spurred me on to really get my teeth into intelligence related stories.
I will tell you this. I pulled up a picture of Nicole Junkermann, and this is the second woman who testified, but she testified as Jane Doe number 2 at the trial. So
definitely not. This definitely not. She's gone on out of her way.
This is her
to have me censored completely on offline, so she was never ever be mentioned. She's not a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. She was an intelligence operative working alongside Jeffrey Epstein.
I'm 90% sure.
Her name, she's now Countess Bracetti Peretti, and her husband is the head of the API oil family of the Bracetti Peretti. She's actually a countess in Italy now. She's not involved in this case at all. I promise.
I'm telling you. Look, if it wasn't her that I was looking at on a big screen, and she's sitting in a witness thing, and it's it's a little bit recessed back to get like the judge and the witness, and every once in a while I would sort of get up and walk up and sort of peer into to try and get a description of them. Jane
she was not underage when she met.
She was not underage. She was the only one who was not underage.
The reason she business relationship with
she was like 18 or 19, and the reason they brought her in was to establish a pattern as to how he operated with his massages. That's why they brought her in.
She never worked for his enterprise, and also she was to show 24 when she first met him.
Also to show that he had a fetish for the whole schoolgirl type of thing. So that was the reason that she basically testified how he had her dress up sometimes. So then she was not underage, which is why she couldn't be used for that purpose.
But I listen, I'm willing to bet my literally everything I got. That's not Nicole Junkermann. 100%.
I could be
100%.
I could be mistaken. It was a blonde who looked a lot like her.
A whole lot to this story that I've cut down into a very refined piece of time. Let me tell you, she is one of the biggest investors in the world. She was never a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. She was in with his operations the entire time. There was no victimhood there, and at the time she was in relationships with very high up elites, including the head of Adidas, Robert Louis Dreyfus, who she remained in a relationship with through that time. At the same time, she's got companies on either side of Epstein, and she was investing in the same projects as Epstein for over a 20-year period. Nicole Junkermann is not. She wipes her. I mean, what you will find online is an extremely sanitized version. This woman has gone on a legal battle against me behind the scenes to have me just wiped offline for the past few years. So it's a very difficult. It's a very difficult situation. She's a hard one.
So what are you, if your best guess as to like what Jeffrey Epstein was? Do you think he's self-made? Do you think that he's an
Interlocutor. It depends which time period you look at, and the time period everybody wants to look at. I believe he's a kind of, you could call it, and it's hard to work out what, because it's a big grey blob of intelligence agencies working across loads of nation states. But I would describe him as a fundamentally an interlocutor based in the US, so somehow
what
related
is an
with the
interlock? What do you
CIA.
mean by that term?
So
Interlock.
basically, he helps to bring in other intelligence agencies, national intelligence agencies, into the US for domestic intelligence operations and other intelligence operations outside, as an interlocutor for the intelligence agents of the CIA, most likely. I think he's CIA, lots of links to CIA, but he's bringing in and dealing with things like MI6 and Mossad, so he's heavily related with all of these. And what they were doing was basically, I believe, doing something that's a bit like Operation Condor, multinational intelligence operation, where they look like it's funded by the other person, but it's actually funded by you, by a conduit to that person who then funds that person. And then it's all murky, and then you're all working together anyway. So I think he was part of the intelligence blob. I think he like things like Prince Andrew show that he was obviously allowed to have that sort of access by MI6. So there must be some sort of like deal there. He had smuggled guns and helped fund smuggling guns through Iran-Contra. And at the time he knew Prince Andrew was the head of the British Overseas Arms Trade Board. So he was actually the main arms dealer for the UK at that time. So it would make sense that those two behaviors pattern over maybe 20 years. But then he has also provably sold other things, arms, defense stuff. And
How do you know he sold arms?
he was involved in Iran-Contra. Him and Khashoggi helped fund Cyrus Hashemi and Stanley Pottinger to organize the arms deals that were around the October surprise. I mean, he's listed. This is he. There is things I can't talk about the later stuff, because it's trying to pick through it at the moment and trying to understand. But he continues to be involved in arms dealing at an extremely high level post the time of Andrew. So on from, like, say 2007, 2008 onwards, he's still involved in high level arms dealing, and that will come out. Really high level arms dealing. I'm talking about systems you don't want dealt with. People like that.
What does high level arms dealing mean? What does that mean?
State. So state level. So working to selling arms.
So you're saying the same way we had the whole Iran Contra thing back in the 80s. You're saying he was doing something
that just
similar.
Continued. Yeah, just continued. That was part of his. I mean, I helped research for One Nation Under Blackmail, and I mean, the amount of information that came into that book was just unbelievable. It became just like to the point where you couldn't take most of it in, and I didn't deal with most of that. I dealt with certain areas, but what then I've, like, the pieces I've dealt with like afterwards have all pointed at the same thing. And some of the information I know that is going to eventually form other books and other articles also point at the same thing. There was a massive arms dealing factor to Epstein. That's what his relationship with and the grooming, in a sense, because this was elite grooming of Prince Andrew. Maxwell put in a lot of attention, and Andrew's a bit of like he's not really, like, you don't want to hang around with him. It gave them influence, but he played an important part for the British arms industry, and that's really overlooked. If you actually look at what he was doing all through that time, it put people like Epstein in the room with the highest level of government. When in I think it is 2000, 2002, when he goes to Asia with Clinton, he ends up in Singapore. When I was looking through, when I was doing the One Nation Under Blackmail research, I found pictures on the Singapore National Archive that showed a meeting with the highest people in Singapore. And during that trip, they took a little trip into China too.
Yeah,
No one
they
talks
were all
about that.
they were all around Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
There
But
was
there's certain parts when they take these trips, they suddenly go into these areas, and these people are selling out their own country. They're selling out all countries, and it's part of an ideology that goes back years that then relates to the Schwab stuff. Because in like understanding what these people do, you've got to go back to people like Kissinger and the post World War II era, the CIA, the forming of the CIA, the people who created the ideology we have now, perpetual limited warfare, mutually assured destruction, the understanding of what the future would look like that was created in the late 60s, really, by people like Herman Kahn and others for the State Department, and then pictured the next 200 years, or well, year 2000, then the next 200 years, and looked at all the technology, mapped out what they needed to do to win every arms race in the future. And then afterwards, it's just been the constant drone of the increase of technology at the same time, perpetual limited warfare.
okay. You're obviously a font of information, okay? But I sort of feel as if like you have so much information. I sort of want to make it a little bit more digestible, if that's okay, and slow you down and just sort of and present it in a way that's a little bit easier to digest for both me and my audience, as far as like the timeline of the evolution of Jeffrey Epstein from some whatever professor into becoming this billionaire playboy with his own island and an asset for the government. I mean, that's not the natural career arc that anyone would picture. So by your best estimation, if you can just give me like sort of like a breakdown of like, okay, around this time is where we know that he's working here, and I think he got laid off, right? I mean, he was like he was a failure early in his career, from what I recall reading about him. So walk me through how you see his life arc going with respect to his involvement with these different agencies, and all of a sudden that he became fabulously wealthy from being nothing, and the cover story, what seems like a cover story, as far as him being him playing stock markets and in ways that no one ever saw him doing anything on the stock market, of the significance of what he was purportedly doing. So let's walk me through it in chronologically, if you can. Okay, so walk me through from like when he's a failure. Okay, which was around what time period are we talking about?
So we're talking mid-70s. He's like gone to Dalton College, or however you call it. I can never remember the name of the university. And he's basically looks like he's recruited into some sort of intelligence thing. Donald Barr is involved, and it seems very suspicious. But then he gets into Bear Stearns, doesn't last long, gets exposed for something they claim, but I think they're just trying to whitewash it a bit. And then it just looks like he's hanging around in these big financial firms. And at this time, in the late 70s, when this is happening, people have got to realize what the financial firms of New York were doing and what they look like. Computers were coming in, and the technology was changing. In 1970, they had actually passed some sort of act that meant there had to be lots more accountability, and accounts had to be shown, and they had to start to be computerized, and etc. And that didn't really get enforced until the mid 1970s. So suddenly all of these lawyers and vulture lawyers, like really looking for companies, were bringing in compliance officers, really, people to look for where they're going to be weak in the law. And with that, there was lots of money to be made, and of course lots of like compromise to be found on companies. And there's lots of activities going on in this point, and there's a stew of intelligence within that New York elite scene, because that's where the money is. And at this time, you have to realize how important George H.W. Bush is, because he has been like the head of the CIA in 1976. He gets in, and he's heading towards, he wants to head towards becoming president, really. He wants to challenge Ronald Reagan, and he goes all of that way. But to get into power, he had to make concessions, and one of the things that had to happen was the whole Iranian hostage siege and the holding of the hostages. So then you could see what Epstein was doing then. Epstein was involved with the gun running. Same people with Stanley Pottinger, who's one of the Epstein victims' lawyers. So on the other side, also run guns with him during.
We're in the mid
around
80s
Contra.
now at this point.
So we're by this time we're in 80. We're in 1980. First of all, they're funding and they're meeting in rooms. You've got it's a federal agency. I don't think it's the FBI, but it's a federal agency. Are recording the offices of Cyrus Hashemi at this point. This will come out in 1984. So we know all of this information for sure. All of these people were mixing with the same, Bronfmans and the Rothschilds and all of these. There's a big elite scene in New York in the early 90s. But all of this sort of like everybody's in trouble and everybody's making money and everything's booming and they got operations going. And at this time, they obviously we're seeing a glimpse of what they did during the October surprise when you got like people like William Casey and other people meeting in Madrid and other places to organize what is essentially the overthrow of the American democratic system. They were making sure that the hostages get held so that Jimmy Carter would lose the election and it would put Reagan and Bush in. That is like an overthrow of democracy by someone who has just been in the CIA.
To be fair, putting the hostages aside, I'm old enough to remember 1970, the late 70s, and I'll tell you right now, the economy was such dog crap that I think Reagan.
Not for those people. Not for those people. They were raking it in. They were doing these operations.
There was an oil crisis in the 70s. There was an oil crisis in the 70s.
Money came from.
It was. How old are you?
I am. Do I have to say 44?
Okay,
coming up.
I'm 53. Okay, so I was born 1970, and I remember sitting in my dad's Buick and waiting in line. You could only buy gas on like every other day, depending on when your license plate, whether it ended in
we had to say in Britain.
Yeah. Because there was such a terrible gas crisis. The economy was a disaster. Today, people forget just what an utter disaster Carter was as a president. So was that perhaps manipulated? You're saying the Ayatollah was working together with the CIA.
Listen.
Or arguably, Reagan was a little bit more intimidating than Carter was, and they did not want to deal with him. So that's
evidenced. It was evidenced by the 90s when they had the actual like investigations into what happened in Iran-Contra. Even like was it Pasandida, I think, who was one of the ones who gave testimony, and all of the records were there. All of over a couple of months, the CIA met with the heads, including General Mandani and others, heads of Iran's forces, and worked out a deal to hold the hostages in return for arms.
I haven't seen that. I'm saying the Iran-Contra thing was definitely true.
Documented.
The Iran-Contra is definitely true. I'm just saying that what you're alleging. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I've never seen it.
You can read the second article in the Pottinger series I've written is called "The Pottinger Supremacy," and it goes through the central role Pottinger had in Iran-Contra and how it was working. Also, within One Nation Under Blackmail, the whole meetings are all sourced out, and a lot of this comes from the official hearings that come after. I can't remember. It's a really long title. It's like the hearing title, but it is all super documented. I mean, there was no better time. Like, I looked at that and it was like everything is there. Loads of different array of witnesses. You can work out what really went on.
Okay, so now we're in the early 80s. Let's try and like move along to like his development, the different development stages of
This is good. I like it. In 1984, 1985, he's making money around the place, but Iran-Contra gets exposed by the FBI. People like Giuliani's making a statement saying, "Oh, we're wondering whether we're going to indict Stan Pottinger over Iran-Contra," and everybody's crapping themselves. Stan Pottinger, who's central, runs off to Mexico to hide out. Everybody goes into hiding a bit, but then Les Wexner comes into town. New York City, 1986, 1987. Les Wexner's decided, hey, I'm going to come in and I'm going to rule the roost for a little bit. I'm going to show everybody, get everybody involved. He had already mobilized Jewish groups for about 20 years beforehand. He was an amazing organizer. And when he entered into this scene, he was like, this is my big scene. This is the place where I can get all of the investment, the money, all of the things to do. And that point is obviously where him and Epstein mixed for the first time. It's quite unclear when it happened, but then he became his biggest backer, which I mean I think is a bit of a front in itself with the way these circles these people were working in. And then in 1989, of course, around that time, he met Ghislaine Maxwell and Robert Maxwell, and Robert Maxwell obviously wanted to find a good partner for his favorite daughter, and Ghislaine saw, she's a really, and if you profile her, she's a narcissistic preferential pedophile, and Epstein is a narcissistic preferential pedophile. So both of them go together and see each other and see for what they are, and they create an operation, and that's what starts off in the 90s.
I'm just hoping that YouTube
operation.
can't recognize your accent when you're using some of these terms.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that, mate. So basically, then you're into the 90s where the operation begins. 1990, Stan Pottinger, who's helped Iran-Contra, buys a house 500 meters away from Jeffrey Epstein's 358 El Brillo Way. They buy him at the same time in 1990, and there's where his House of Hell is. That's when the grooming starts. That's when he starts sending out people like Ghislaine Maxwell and the girls to start basically bringing in teenage girls from the local high schools, Palm Beach, to give him massages. And then that's where they start slowly purchasing the other places, over the next 10 years. That's really what happens. It's the island, Zorro Ranch, and then becoming, trying to have all of these places where he could have his little pet projects going on. One of his pet projects, of course, was science. That can't be understated. He was definitely into science, and he created something called the Edge Foundation, which then turned into something else. It was kind of like getting all of the scientists, and if you want to influence this tech world that's going at really high speed, you get involved with all of the tech people. That's how he gets involved with Junkermann too. 2002, 2003, he's balls out, flying around with Bill Clinton, going from country to country, meeting with the high-level delegates, doing deals.
But how does he amass his money in your estimation? Is he gifted to him?
No, listen. Everybody wants to create. Yes, he takes his opportunities all the time. So 80%, I say 80% of his money is just backing from Les Wexner, and with that, he goes in and he does deals for behind the scenes for people who don't want to be known, and they're talking about him in the banks where he's got his own office and he's constantly working, yet the bank doesn't see any money going through at times, and then it's like loads of money all of a sudden. He's obviously doing shady stuff all over the place for other people, and he's taking cuts off the top all over the place, so he's making lots of money. He's not a stupid man. Everything comes easy to him. That's very suspicious why he was chosen to be that person, because by my research,
what does that mean, chosen to be that person?
Because
I'm just trying to slow you down. I'm trying to slow you down a little bit, because
listen, you don't get to that level of fixer without having some form of something at the beginning where you are allowed into that elite group, that establishment.
Right. Okay.
You have to.
That makes sense.
Yeah, the thought that his parents are who they are, and I'm not sure about this. Sometimes I've even thought, was his name really Epstein? Was he just a construct? Was it something? Honestly, one day I'm going to dive into all of that, and I'm a bit of a king at looking into people's family history. But I get a feeling that one, it's got to have a treasure trove of information. He's got to be someone. There's no way that this guy was allowed to do all of this. Some of the people that
you're saying you're suspicious that his parents were actually like someone famous or something like that? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I'm not connected to someone. Connected like one degree of separation. The mother was actually a cousin of so and so. It really is that simple. But it has to be something. There's no way through everything I've ever looked at that someone comes into prominence like that without either being extremely gifted or coming from a line of very gifted people.
Right. No, I agree with you. It is a little weird for him to find that for them. There always is a little bit of nepotism that gets played into these things. So for someone to just all of a sudden be thrust into this is kind of strange. Do you think that the whole sordid sexual element to Epstein, do you think that was part of a cover? Do you think that was just his proclivity? What are your thoughts on that?
I 99.9% of I've gone through like all of the witness statements I could find, all of the evidence that had come out from people like you that had come through the court, and there was a lot put out when he died as well, as kind of like to give to the crowd. And what you learn is that the majority of those people were Palm Beach residents who were used for his own sexual desires. Sexual compromise was done by the slightly older girls. I think it was very rare that you come across people want it to be every single person, but preferential pedophiles are a very limited, very small group of people, so I think a lot of it was sexual compromise that was happening on the planes and stuff. And that's kind of like, adult girls, a lot of them who were groomed from very young ages, has its own scars, has its own method behind it. And I think the whole case was then built to fall apart. It was like a lot of the girls who were the everyday going and giving the massages, who were the victims from 13, 14, 15 years old, they all got pushed to the side, and you had a very small select group of named victims who now, with the last Epstein drop, people are starting to realize, so there's some credibility issues, lots of credibility issues. They've changed their stories massively. Actually, they've gone back on large parts, and it feels like it was constructed to fall apart. So that's what I think the sex side of it is massively important, is really like a compromise operation, obviously, but the details.
When you say compromise information, you're saying it's one of these triple letter agencies that are trying to have blackmail material over some of these people that he would lure into like the island or various other.
I think he's like freelance for a couple of agencies, and if one agency wants some sort of a compromise over someone, and you're a clever, savvy guy, and you can see, that guy over there, it would be useful if that intelligence service had that information at that time, then you could go to that intelligence service, and etc. So I think
that's really my question, because it definitely seems like he was trying to store blackmail material on people. I'm wondering if you think he was doing that for his own personal benefit, or you think he was doing that on behalf of the state, because that sort of changes the nature as to why this stuff went missing and how the government has acted strangely. And this is what I want to point out to you. Okay, they went very hard after Ghislaine Maxwell to get a conviction on her. It seemed really the government did a phenomenal job lawyering in their efforts to go after her. They also seem to be working very, very hard to keep out names as much as possible. They were working very hard to do that. And my question, I don't know if the reason they did that, there could be two very different reasons why they would do that. One is because he was working for the CIA, and they don't want people to realize that he was part of the CIA, and if this stuff comes out, so in that case the ties to the CIA will come out. And a completely different thing is not that they're protecting the CIA, but that these people who he has leverage over are so powerful that it's like basically you have Comey, who was Maureen Comey, who was the head of district attorney, going after him, that she's like, I don't want to go after Clinton. I don't want to embarrass Clinton. It's not a matter of I'm worried about embarrassing the CIA. I'm worried about embarrassing the individuals who are named. And I'm not trying to name Clinton specifically, but it could be like dozens of other people who were caught in this honey trap, and it was a matter of protecting them rather than protecting the triple letter agency. So I'm wondering, based on your investigation, which of those two do you think was the primary focus here? And was it for his own personal benefit so he can extort from them, or do you think it was for the government so that the government would be able to use these people as they saw fit?
I think he's a freelance fixer working for the CIA as an interlocutor, bringing in other intelligence agencies, and they're all working together to create profit and a new world order that we know they're trying to create.
So you're saying
I think
both.
his access.
You're saying both.
I'm saying his access to people like Clinton and others, and the way they worked together,
And
suggested
Trump,
that
and you know,
yeah, of course, he had a relationship with lots. He was a kingmaker in the Democrat world, so he funded Lieberman and Richardson. They were both likely to be the vice president candidates for Al Gore, and it ended up being Lieberman who ended up being the vice president candidate. He was also meeting with Gore. We know from he was funding Kerry, and Kerry was the most likely to be afterwards, and he was funding it up until 2002 when they met with the two senators while John Kerry was the senator in the Foxcoat House that I investigated. He was a kingmaker. He was hanging around with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because everybody knew in the Democratic Party that if you want Kennedy and he had sorted his life out a bit, then he was going to be potential king, and that's what he was all about in the Democratic Party. Now that is partially, I think, as one of the jobs he did as CIA as well, is that you've got to keep all your players in line, and all your players know that they're playing this game. They know, listen, if you go in to be a president or vice president, you're going to be dealing with the heads of the CIA, and you're going to have to get on with them, and you're going to have to do your best for your country. And once they show you things, and that's all the information you've got, and you've got to make decisions, whether it's true or not, you're going to make decisions based on those principles, because that's how the system works. So it's very much, I think he's freelance for the CIA. He's able to work with loads of different places, make his own money, so he looks free and single. And he's got this foreign Israeli backer who's constantly backing, but that Israeli backer is allowed to mix around in all of the different communities, Jewish community groups, to organizing them in America, because it's very important that there was a link especially after 1967, between the CIA and Israel.
okay, so so you think the reason he got the special treatment from Jim Acosta, from Acosta, when not Jim Acosta, from the district attorney Acosta, when he was first charged in 2007, you think that was because he was an asset?
Mm-hmm. Not only was he an asset, but they had to get rid of they had to come to a compromise. Listen, at 2004, he knew he was going to be investigated. One of the first people, when they raided his house, they took up the notepads, and one of the notepads was from a message to return the call to David Bowies. David Bowies, one of the other victims' lawyers for Epstein. So Bowies, Pottinger, and Edwards are the three main lawyers who have worked for Epstein victims, and all of them have different connections with Jeffrey Epstein. Stan Pottinger ran guns with Jeffrey Epstein. You're talking about lawyering. Edwards met with Jeffrey Epstein for 8 years before the case before the final arrest in 2019 in the Starbucks in Boca Raton, where they would hammer out legal stuff even before the Virginia Giuffre had come back, it seems. And Bowies himself was written on the pad. There's lots of connections between these lawyers and Epstein. So I think the first case was sewn up so that it would basically be he would have the most lenient treatment possible, where in fact he probably should have been sent down for life. You have to realize over 10 years, 2.5 massages a day, that's 8,000 different counts of something. He should never leave prison. And instead, the systemized abuse of young girls was ignored and allowed him to walk out of prison again. What's going to happen in the second case? 2013, they go question Virginia Giuffre. The FBI go to Australia. She comes back the following year, 2014, gets together with Bradley Edwards. Straight away, Stanley Pottinger comes and says, "Hello, you might not know me, Mr. Edwards. My name's Stanley Pottinger. I used to do this, that, the other. If you knew who Stanley Pottinger is, it just blows your mind. He was the guy who stamped and signed off the Watergate investigation. He signed off the investigation into Martin Luther King's assassination, said no FBI fuckery going on. Kent State Massacre, he was centrally involved in the case for that Wounded Knee, the standoff at Wounded Knee, where the FBI harassed the Native Americans from the Pine Ridge Reservation. He was centrally involved in that. He ran guns with Jeffrey Epstein in the Iran Contra, all of this sort of stuff comes straight into the case. Bradley Edwards, 2020, I think it is, writes Relentless Pursuit. And in it, he says over and over again that Stanley Pottinger is a CIA super spy, that he is obviously CIA. And he asks him at one point in the book, he says, are you CIA? And he was like, oh, no, of course I'm not CIA. But he says all the way, he thinks David Bowie and Stan Pottinger are CIA. So the second case, taken over by the CIA. They tried to, as long as they could. I think 2017, an operation started that was headed up by Matthew Pottinger, who's Stanley Pottinger's son, when he got made Deputy National Security Advisor under Trump. And then that led to the death of Jeffrey Epstein and the sweeping it under the carpet because there was too many presidential candidates in the future that had links to him. And also the weapons stuff was probably going to come out eventually, and that will come out.
Who do you think was behind his death?
I think, well, if it's obviously someone's got, what was his name, Nick, to strangle him. Just as simple as it is. I think he knew that I think whoever it was who murdered him was left in a cell with the cameras off, with two guards asleep at the wheel.
I'm not questioning whether it was suicide or not. I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence.
I think Epstein knew his time was up. He resisted the first attempt for this to happen. The first attempt where he said he got attacked. I think that was him resisting the first attempt, and he accepted the second attempt. And I think it was just the end of the line. He couldn't go any further. He knew it. He never accepted defeat. Never accepted defeat, and I think he had to eventually.
Well, all right. Let's move on to Klaus Schwab. Cartoon villain number 2.
I'm ready.
If you need to take a break, for a few minutes, because you've been
I got
dropping. You've been dropping a lot, So if you need to just sort of like breathe for a minute, that's cool. But I'm wondering, because I look at both of these people, Klaus Schwab, and do you see? I'll ask you rather than me throwing out there. Do you see any commonality between Klaus Schwab and Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah, they swim in the same circles. They have lots of the same connections. It's hard to explain that without telling you the story of Klaus Schwab. Really, I mean,
okay. Well, we'll get in. We're certainly going to get into that. Because I'm going to tell you this: when I look at Klaus Schwab today, just the imagery we see of him, there's an unusual commonality between them. Did you ever see Brett Weinstein's breakdown of his meeting with Jeffrey Epstein?
No. Are you talking about Brett Weinstein or Eric Weinstein?
I think Brett.
Okay, because I know Eric Weinstein claimed that he had met Jeffrey Epstein once in an office. I know a bit about that.
It was Eric. They're telling me it's Eric, so maybe I was mistaken. Perhaps it was Eric. Right. So, and he was talking about how he was he seemed like the most fake person he's ever seen in his life, in the sense that he's like, I don't mean like, like you meet people and they're fake. Like this had to be like completely created.
Eric lied. He lied.
He
had been in part of the Edge Foundation for ages when it was 100% funded by Epstein. That's what I've learned. Well, ages.
Okay.
Well, he was Eric Weinstein was central in the Edge Foundation when it was 100% funded by Epstein. Before that, Eric Weinstein was in the UN. He makes no sense. He doesn't mention that anywhere. And when I went back to look into him, I was like, oh, just another one. So just I like Brett. I think Brett's really nice. I think he's well-meaning, but sometimes he doesn't realize, things he says are a bit strange. I remember him telling off a load of black people about racism once. It was just I could watch it. But Eric, I think he lied. And he's met Epstein a few occasions.
No, what I'm saying is, what he claimed that when he met him, he was like saying that, he says he's a traitor when he clearly knows very little about him, and he's like none of the stuff he was saying made any sense, and he just seemed like he was portraying himself like he wanted you to be intimidated. Like he's like his his coffee table looked like a coffin. Like it looked like a coffin with an American flag draped across it. It's like this is like what someone would create cartoonishly. Like it's like no one is like this really. And that's what, and he was basically saying like he was fascinating person, but everything just seemed to be just some show that wasn't even necessarily created by him. And he was basically, describing him as being some sort of asset that was poorly put together and poorly crafted. And the reason I bring this up in this context, like it was like, it's like when you was picturing a cartoon.
That's a fair comment. I sometimes I see Jeffrey Epstein as a cartoon dog. He's so stupid sometimes. Yeah, at other times.
That's the thing. When I see Klaus Schwab, I have the same thought. He's literally wearing some crazy black costume that you would never. It's like this is like, and he talks and he's got this heavy German accent, and he talks like the cartoonish, evil German, super rich, super evil, terrible. Like I'm going to dominate the world. Like he's, like he's a cartoon. And I'm just like, it's so weird that they're both like these wealthy guys who are cartoonishly evil, and it's such a weird thing that it made me ask the question whether maybe this whole thing with the WEF and everything that we know, which definitely sounds like the most evil thing imaginable when they're talking about some new world order and the World Economic Forum and everything that's going on there, it sounds as evil as possible. And then I wonder if this is all just some psyops, because the guy who's leading this thing just seems like such a cartoon. I'm like, it can't be real. It can't be real that someone actually is like this. And that's why I framed it this way, where I was basically asking if that thought ever crossed your mind that maybe this whole thing is just some big charade that, like, I mean, yeah, I understand why we would jump to the conclusion that this all makes total sense because rich people and they're evil and they're power hungry, and this is all consistent with those typical ambitions. On the other hand, I'm just like, I don't know. People have a struggle to get together on when there's a lot of money at stake. People struggle to get together on who's getting what piece of it, and I question whether or not this whole thing is some sort of just mirage that's being thrown at us. So I want to throw that out at you and ask whether you ever considered that possibility with respect to Klaus Schwab, or if you can disabuse me of this notion and say that it cannot be. I'd love to hear your explanation as to why you think that cannot be.
I would say that with Klaus Schwab, his cartoon image, his James Bond villain,
James
on
Bond
a mountain top in Davos stroking the cat is beautifully constructed over time, because it's really easy. They knew already. They knew what his job was. For how he's similar to Jeffrey Epstein when he left Harvard. When Klaus Schwab left university, he went back to Germany, and he had to form the World Economic Forum with two people Kissinger gave him. To go back.
Right. I read this in your thing. Why don't we go through this? Why don't we go through the Klaus Schwab story?
Before he did that, he went off and he became a nuclear arms dealer for the South African apartheid regime. Yeah. So he sold weapons from his dad's old company, which was merging. The guy who was running it phoned him up and said, "Hey, you've just left Harvard. Why don't you come back and help us reform Schulze AG and Escher Weiss together with Brown Bavaria into a new company?" I kind of forget all of our Nazi roots because all of them had Nazi roots. So when he came back,
most people watching may not know what Escher Weiss is, and that's why I want you to just go through his origins so people can appreciate when you're throwing these names out here, because otherwise it just sounds like words and people aren't really digesting. So let's start at the beginning of who Klaus Schwab is, who his father was, and then give some context as to where he's coming from, and then the developments over the course of his life.
Mm-hmm. So
if that's okay.
Klaus, no problem at all. I mean, right. I was asked to given 6 weeks to find out who Klaus Schwab's father was, because there was no sign of it back when I started. There was rumors. Most of it was, he was a Rothschild or something along those lines. And so I went out and I had to basically go back to the 1500s and work forward every Schwab I could find. And eventually I found his father. It took me 6 weeks, about 5-6 weeks. A guy called Eugen Schwab, and Eugen Schwab was managing director of a company that made large turbines, massive turbines, like enormous, for ships and for hydroelectric dams. And he, of course, was situated in Escher Weiss when it was part owned by the German government. When the
Escher
Nazis
Weiss is a
came into
company,
power.
is a Nazi
Yeah.
company.
It was given the title in 1938, I think it was, or 37, of a model Nazi company, and they put it in the book and said it's the best company. He was the managing director. Now in Ravensburg, where
His father was the managing director.
Yeah. So
Eugen.
Eugen Schwab was the managing director of Escher Weiss factories in Ravensburg in Germany, in Oberschwabia, and it was a massive, sprawling, nearly the whole town was employed by this arms. Also made arms. During the war, it would make bits for fighter planes, it would make other parts for
Right.
the war machine, for submarines, etc. Really central. It actually, during the war, got special permission not to be bombed by the Allies, which was very strange. And because they said, oh, the Red Cross is going to be in there, but in actual fact, they were using slave labor for a lot of this work. So his father, Eugen Schwab, was central to the Nazi atomic bomb program. When that started, of course, they were trying to create heavy water, and they needed to use massive turbines. Those turbines were made in Escher Weiss. So the model Nazi company that Klaus Schwab's father ran during the war was basically one of the main, was also not getting bombed, so was one of the centers of the German Nazi atomic bomb program. Of course, that didn't work out for him, but by 1964, his father was saying to Klaus, listen, if you want to be a success, you've got all of these different degrees from all these different universities, because you're a clever young man, go across to America and go study at Harvard. And at Harvard, there was a special course going on where if you got invited to the course, most likely you were invited, you would be on the road to leadership. So it was Henry Kissinger's international seminar that was set up via CIA conduits, Farfield Foundation, the American Friends of the Middle East, and the Asia Foundation. It was basically a leadership program, a young global leaders program very early on. Klaus Schwab went through this program in 1965, came out in 1967. Pierre Trudeau went through the program. Valéry Giscard, who was a president in France. There was an Israeli prime minister who I can't remember, or president who went through there, and a Japanese. But basically, it was the start of the Young Global Leaders program. And when he came out of that program, 1967, two things happened. Firstly, Kissinger himself gave John Kenneth Galbraith, one of the most important statesmen in American history, and the real Dr. Strangelove, Herman Kahn, to Klaus Schwab to go back and create the European Management Symposium, which we know today as the World Economic Forum. And for that, they were John Kenneth Galbraith was a co-keynote speaker with von Habsburg on the first event, and Herman Kahn, of course, was there too, and drew in the crowds and made the event a spectacular success. At the same time, there was a lot going on. As I said to you as we started this out, Peter Schmidheiny, whose father Jacob Schmidheiny used to run Escher Weiss alongside Schwab's father, was now the head of Escher Weiss, of one of the presidents. And he said, come to us and help our merger between these three companies. He goes to help the merger, and under the cover of the merger, they start selling atomic weaponry or nuclear weapons technology to the South African regime. This later comes out in reports in Switzerland, where they had.
What time period are we talking about now at this point?
We're talking at this point. We're talking late 60s. So between 1967 and 1969, he's an arms dealer. Schwab's an arms dealer, dealing arms to another fascist regime, just like his father had done for the Nazis, repeating in his father's footsteps as the first thing when he comes out of the gate. By 1970, he's announcing that they're going to start running the European Management Symposium, and really it's heading towards what Kissinger and others imagined, which was a young global leaders program. That's really what was they were heading towards. That's what they wanted. So we see the dips and dives on what direction the World Economic Forum's taken and through history. But what's a really important thing to note, certain periods in 1993, when they run the first Global Leaders for Tomorrow program, which was had Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Nicolas Sarkozy, Angela Merkel, Viktor Orban, all these big leaders of the future all went through that first program on that first year. And then year after that, and then in 2004, they created the Young Global Leaders from that program. They stopped the one program, started a new one, and that was done with money given, a $1 million prize given to Schwab from the Dan David Foundation, and Kissinger was on the board for that foundation as well. So in a sense, Kissinger continued the Young Global Leaders program he had started off in Harvard under the tutelage of William Yandell Elliott, a really big CFR member and advisor to 6 presidents. Really important story, because it's the story of our leadership program. It's the story of and why did that happen? Well, we go back to 1967. This is really the other major thing that happened was Herman Kahn released a couple of different papers for the State Department. One was published as the year 2000 and predicted all of the technologies that we could perceive for the future, gamed out through game theory and other methods at the Hudson Institute, and basically showed us everything we need to know in the future. The other was about how to train leadership group outside society, just after Kissinger's international seminar got outed by the New York Times, Rampart magazine, and their own Humphrey Dorman at Harvard for being a CIA-funded conduit leadership program. And so then came a new age. They had to start a new thing.
So it was exposed as being CIA funded?
Yeah, 1967, Humphrey Dorman had to admit, literally the year Klaus Schwab graduated from the seminar, it got outed in the New York Times because Ramparts magazine was about to do a piece on it, and then Humphrey Dorman jumped out in front, a member of Harvard, and basically said, yeah, well, okay, we took CIA funding, but what can you do about it? Everybody was admitting at the time. Gloria Steinem was admitting that she was taking CIA funding. She was 10 years in a relationship with Stan Pottinger. She the whole time was everybody CIA. They're recruiting everybody, baby, and it was fun times for these people. So it's not too much of a surprise. 1967, that really important. Herman Kahn and the leadership, he wrote a paper for the State Department about training the leadership group outside normal university establishments and dumbing down the quality of normal universities, so that you basically have a slave class and you have then a master class, and that's what we've seen develop.
So at a certain point, they changed from being, what was it initially called? The WEF? You said it was called the Symposium?
European Management Symposium, and then 2 years later it was the European Management Forum, and then it was World Economic Forum in about 1990, and since then it's been the WEF, but the WEF has many tentacles, many arms, and many different faces.
But it doesn't seem like it's only recently that we started hearing so much about how they have this agenda to make the entire world into this one unified global, no boundaries, no borders, we're going to control everything type of entity. Did it start off with that stated agenda, or was that something that evolved over time?
It started off as a tentacle of the anti-communist and the sort of Russia-phobe side of American politics. Of course, it was that era. They had come across the fact that, okay, we're going to have mutually assured destruction. If we have mutually assured destruction, then we're entering into a stage where we're just going to stand off and we're not going to do anything, and we're going to use other tactics. And then the spy games really got into play. And so from 1967 onwards until 1990, when they come out. They were the European Management Symposium and Forum. And they got to come out because the fall of Soviet Russia meant they could say, ha, we're actually globalists funded by the CIA. But we haven't told you that bit yet. So, the whole thing got brought into creation by intelligence agencies from multiple countries, I think, probably working together. Because if you look at it now, you still see that. If you look at like any of the cyber pandemic stuff that they did, I did a lot of study for that with Unlimited Hangout, and it, you know, what they're doing, they're still working with. They were working with Mikhail Mishustin, the what president or prime minister of Russia at the time, and Sberbank and everything like this, and they're creating the same structures there as they're creating over here, and they're creating the policy for all of us to live by, and they're creating the chains around us. It's a fantastic system they've got, and they're so far ahead of the game. Most of us are only just catching up now. You're saying exactly that. You know, on 2020, everybody started to be cognizant of this overarching globalist,
and it's something none of us ever heard of before.
I know.
None
It
of us
was meant
ever
to
heard
be
of
that
it.
way. It was meant to be that way because as soon as you examine it, you start to realize that it's all because that's what I did. I had that same feeling. 2020, I'm like polishing away, trying to work out who Klaus Schwab is, and what I see behind it is like this whole front. He's had his whole identity created by this massive machine that creates the truth, you know. And then you look at the actual parts, the main parts. Like if you talk about right hand man of Klaus Schwab, you should look at Richard Edelman, part of Edelman PR. And Edelman PR basically have contracts for about 60% of the major governments and countries all around the world. Biggest PR agency by far, with lots of derivatives. They use lots of real PR warfare, really dirty players. Every time there's a government in trouble, they call Edelman PR. These guys are, you know, Daniel Edelman, who created Edelman PR, was PSYOPs during World War II. And it all kind of comes down to the fact that if you look at what they do within the World Economic Forum, they do the Edelman Barometer. So they tell you all of the main 4 parts of society, how they're doing, what we expect for the future. They call Saudi Arabia great every single time, and they go through all of the routines. And it's all a bit of an operation, but it's a brilliant PSYOP. And they can tell you, if you watch them, they'll tell you what they're going to do over the next few years to your face, because no one's watching them, really. No one's watching them. So if you're looking at stuff from 2015, 16, I think they realize that. So they're just able to say loads of things openly. That made it really easy to look back and say, oh God, you only have to listen to what they say, and they paint the dystopian view for you. They paint the view that you fear for you.
Right.
They're supposed to be hiding it. They've just
they're not hiding the ball anymore.
Yeah. No, they wouldn't.
I mean, they even have commercials saying like you own nothing and you'll be happy. I mean, it's the most insane.
That was a thought experiment. That was a thought experiment. I mean, you give them. It's a fantastic way to look at them because that's how it is. But it was a thought experiment by one woman. I can't remember what her name was. But that whole thing is exactly the society they want to us to live in. They want us to go to a new house every night. Yeah, we don't have the same house. We go to a new house and we have our clothes delivered to us because we're not allowed to buy clothes anymore. And we put on our clothes and we have our food delivered to us. And we no longer live in a community. We're in a mega city. Now, it's changed from 15-minute city. Suddenly everything went upwards because technology is just around the corner for that to happen. So they know what they're doing. They're pushing everybody in and then everybody goes upwards. And everybody goes, well, at least that was better than the shit we had before. And it goes round in a circle like that.
What can you tell me about BlackRock?
BlackRock, really interesting. Nicole Junkermann had an affair with Robert Louis Dreyfus, and Margarita Louis Dreyfus ran off with Philip Hildebrand when he was the head of BlackRock. There you go. There's a bit of saucy juice. Well, BlackRock and Vanguard and stuff, they're just these massive entities that obviously, again, like
are they associated with WEF? Are they?
Yes, yeah. All of these guys have. I'm sure BlackRock's associated with WEF. But the thing is knowing all of the things the WEF are doing. I went through. It's amazing. They have a Flickr account, yeah. And about 2011, they printed out all of their training slides on their own Flickr account. And someone come along and was like, "Have a look at this," and it's unbelievable. It's like there's population control and everything. I mean it. I'm not making that up. Manipulation. Puppets on a string. It's just like crazy. They see us for what we are, and we see them for what they are. This is where we get down to it, right? So you asked about the cartoon image, and this, after saying all of that, understand they know what they are. and we know what they are. We look at them and they sit on the mountainside and they act the character that they want to be, the status character, the one that's above, the one that's evil, the one that you know is evil but you can't do anything about and you're desperate to do, and it's almost cartoon-like. And while you're there raging at that one person, they've built up a system all around you to completely and utterly control you and dominate you. So it's like they are creating the character they want to be, and that character is always going to come out of society because we write our own stories, and that's a narrative we've been writing for donkey's years, because most of our stories have been written by intelligence agents to make intelligence agencies and these people heroes and villains and the archetypes of our current time. So it's our own construction of who we lift up within society and who garner control always end up being the guy with the cat stroking him on the mountainside, being all evil and not realizing. I met people who went to Davos and said, wow, I went through there, none of them realize what's really going on. They're all off in a world of their own, just like, they don't realize what the real world looks like because they don't live in the real world, because they don't. They've already created their societies, they've already pushed us off loads of the land, and they already use it separately and barely have to look at us, and they barely have to bear us, and they have to think about how to slowly make us go away. And that's basically the whole thing that I see with the World Economic Forum. They're trying to make us slowly go away.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, because I got to tell you, as you're talking here, so much of what you're saying makes complete sense. And then I'm being totally real with you. Every once in a while, I'm envisioning that, like, behind you in the blackness there that we can't see is like a big map with lots of names and red string in like 6,000 different directions, tying it together, and words circled. And I'm like, I'm not sure. It's like a lot of this makes sense. A lot of what he's saying here makes sense. But there's just, I'm just a little.
I write the articles. I put the sources in the articles, and my articles are sourced up.
I'm being totally real with you.
Good sources, man. They're good sources.
I'm being totally real with you. I mean, that's how I can understand someone having, that sort of question. So that's why, I'm looking to
cool
sort of vet out and try to figure out, what I can feel is well documented and sourced, is like you're saying. But I'm gonna venture a little further down this rabbit hole with you. So you've heard about I'm sure you've heard about a gate that involves pizza. So
wow, okay, yeah, go on.
So I'm wondering whether what legitimacy, if any, you think that has.
Well, I think that for years people have used code words. For years people have done salacious, disgusting stuff. They've had to organize it some way. What is true or not, once you actually expose any information out there into the world, you suddenly discover that nearly everybody can make everything out of anything. So you could just say something that's completely innocent, and suddenly it means the most suspicious thing. But of course, it's code words. Of course, it's code words. Of course, I mean, you come across it throughout life, and I'm not naive. Listen, these sort of things are often operations on operations on operations on operations. People even discussing it causes trouble for them down the line. I mean, it's just it's silly. It's silliness. It's part of this whole infrastructure that's been made where we're not in charge of what we can say, and we have no sort of purchase on having proper open conversations, that we can't use certain words and we have to mix things up.
Code,
that whole thing is really just what our society has become. We're in a state of hypernormalization.
I mean, the reason
symptom of hypernormalization.
I will tell you this: I've read through some of those emails, and they're just the conversations was just this is not how normal people talk. I can't they're literally saying things that are just this is weird. This is a really really freaky. Did you read any of those emails?
Yeah, but I when I'm British, and we have British comedy, and British comedy is just crazy stuff, all the time. So I don't think that these people didn't also maybe have a sense of humor. So I don't know how much of that can be misconstrued. But in the same way, it looked guilty as sin. They're nasty people doing nasty things all the time.
And
what
here's
do you
the
think
thing.
they're doing?
Yeah, and here's the thing. You can almost envision that when someone has a lot of money, stupidly wealthy, like more money than they could ever possibly spend in their lifetime, you can understand that there's almost like there's no challenge, and like what they would really get off on is the flex that they can get away with doing something and not worry, and there'll be no repercussions, that they're basically like living gods, that no one can touch them, no one can do anything to them, and they can do whatever they want, no matter how immoral, illegal, and gross. And no one is that's sort of like almost the flex of having that type of wealth. And you can understand how psychologically that would make sense, and that would explain the predilections
To
of
us, they look like clowns. To us, they look like
we look right. We look at them like
villains.
they're clowns, yes. But you can understand why that would form a predilection for the likes of a Jeffrey Epstein to say, like, yeah, I can do something that no one else is able to do, and I'll get away with it, and no one's going to touch me because I'm freaking Jeffrey Epstein. And you could see Klaus Schwab saying, "I'll sit here stroking my cat, telling you all that I'm Dr. No or whomever. I'm some some Blofeld, and I'm some James Bond super evil dude with a laser gun that can like destroy the sun, and no one can stop me." And that's part of like what they feel like, that's how they feel like alive, and like that's how they're sort of flexing and feeling, filling that void that they feel like that their lives are otherwise meaningless. So that's why I can, when I see the whole Gates story there involving the pizza, I'm just like, yeah, I think I can understand. I can understand that being a thing. At the same time, I also this is one of the things I want to caution my audience about, and I want you to sort of consider this also. I think I brought this up. I don't know. Were you on with me on Spaces with Alex Jones? Because I brought this up to him.
Yeah.
And what I mentioned to Alex is that we tend to lose sight when we look at celebrities who know each other. We tend to, as soon as we see a link between them, you're just like, well, I know this person's evil, so it must be that if there's a picture of this person who we know is evil, like Jeffrey Epstein or Klaus Schwab or whoever, and there's a picture of him with some famous other celebrity, that means that they're besties, and that the evil person is influencing the celebrity into doing something completely gross and nefarious because there's a picture of the two of them together. Obviously, what are you blind? Haven't you seen the picture? And it's just like, yeah, they're sort of getting off on the fact that they're in the crowd and that they're hanging out with each other. You can understand that being a motivation for them to take a picture with a Jeffrey Epstein when he's known as a kingmaker, that, yeah, here I am with the kingmaker. I'm buddies with a kingmaker. And you might not even know anything about the disgusting, sordid stuff that he's doing behind closed doors. But then 5-10 years later, when it comes out that he's doing it, then it's like all of a sudden like, well, there's pictures of you with him, and you were sitting there looking all buddy with him. You seem really happy about it. And the dude's like, and you'd be like, I didn't know. How the hell would I know that? But then, but how do you prove that? Because some people are involved with it. So you don't know with each individual. It sort of becomes like this whole testing thing as to like, do I think that this guy is part of the whole evil plan, or is he just some hanger-on who's, latching on with other bigwigs? And we naturally jump towards assuming the worst of everyone that we see associated, when it probably is more likely than not that it's a relatively small percentage of them that are actually involved, because you sort of wouldn't want to share your darkness with people unless you knew you could trust that darkness wasn't going to get you in a whole lot of trouble or expose you or whatever, or bring your whole game crashing down. So it's sort of like it's very difficult for us to actually know. And I think we've been sort of hardwired because we've been lied to so much by the media, and we're so distrusting of all of these wealthy people and all of these powerful people that we just assume the worst of them. And honestly, that doesn't mean that we're anywhere close to accurate on it. I mean, so look, some people like Prince Andrew and others, there's so much testimony, there's so much stuff that's come out.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to say they're all innocent. I'm simply saying I think
there's so much testimony, but at the end of the day, is that Prince Andrew is a human. He's both good and bad. He's very selfish character, and you can tell a lot of what he did out of his own self-interest. It's really murky waters, because over here in Britain, the age of consent is lower than it is in America. So you've got a completely different sort of like thing. If he's had relations with a girl who's 17 over here, it's no longer like considered a crime, so the police won't even look at it. But also the police never investigate the royal family, so there's a nuance to that too. So he was protected in multiple ways. Everybody wants to go to think that Al Gore Al Gore and his wife turn up at Jeffrey Epstein's. I promise you, Al Gore and his wife go to country clubs all the time. And there are young girls who are the age of 16, 17, 18, 19, picking up different towels and stuff and putting them in the wash. And they've got a job there. It's very normal. There was a very normal feeling around some of Jeffrey Epstein's places, unless you were very close in there and then you knew what was going on.
Right.
So a lot of it was like there's articles from like the New York magazine, I think it is, in
New Yorker.
No, I think it's called the New York Magazine. I think it is called the New York Magazine.
Okay.
I can't quite remember. It's a very suspicious magazine. But about 2001, someone goes to Jeffrey Epstein's house, and I think it's in there where they said, "Oh yeah, God, look, it's got cameras up on all of the rooms. That's very strange, but still, it's very nice." And you know, people would go into these situations and they wouldn't think about all of the dynamics of an intel operation because they're not thinking about it.
Right.
I've met loads of people in my life where, like, afterwards, I've been like, "Oh, I should have realized that about them or this." But you take people with a pinch of salt, and if
Right.
you're meeting a money man and you're being told you're meeting a money man, and you go around a wealthy house and they all look pretty happy and cool and calm and etc., and he goes behind a closed door, has a massage, and you don't know anything better, so you don't know, you're not in the room with him, you
Right.
can't know everything that's going on. So a lot of it is just crime behind the doors. That's what abuse is. Nearly, abuse isn't done out in the open. It's
Right.
like, if you go,
That's my point.
it's just, yeah, so you, there is loads of people who automatically say, "Oh, that person was there, so this must have happened."
Right.
Yeah, man, the majority,
I'll say right
like
now, I'm no Al Gore fan, and yet I cannot even imagine him engaging in any of this. I'm the furthest thing from an Al Gore fan. I think he's a hoaxer. I think this whole climate change. I mean, I think he's a liar. But there's something about, I look at him and I'm like, no.
Most boring man alive. No
I'm
way.
like, no,
way.
I don't buy it about him. There's a couple of super chats I want to get to here. Unexpected asks, what are your thoughts on the China model? I don't even know what that is.
No, I don't know what to, well, I suppose they're talking maybe about the future globalism and what China is kind of like going towards. Maybe
I'm googling now the China models. The Beijing Consensus, or China model, also known as the Chinese economic model, is the political and economic policies of the People's Republic of China that began to be instituted by Deng Xiaoping after Mao Zedong's death in 1976. Policies are thought to have been contributed to China's economic miracle, an eightfold growth in gross national product over two decades.
Yeah, that's why. And in about 1980 and onwards, China was really involved with the World Economic Forum. Kissinger already looked forward and basically, China's going to be the big thing of the future, was what was written in all of the bigwigs who run in the same circles. So it was clear that China is seen as the future, and if you can control China and its destiny, then you control the future of the world at the moment.
Jesus Freak says the WHO pandemic preparedness threat preparedness will be the vehicle to start the lockdown. They can declare any emergency, take control. Climate emergency it is. Can you talk to us a little bit about the whole climate change as a vehicle that's used by WEF as a basis to try and implement some of their agenda?
Yeah, well, is two things. It's for the WHO pandemic
pizza bugs. Sorry.
If you go and look on johnnyvedmore.com, you'll find a Welcome 5 article which shows you the 5 men who were, like, heavily British men who were given a lot of the sway over COVID, including Jeremy Farrar, who's now going up to be one of the heads of the WHO. And that's an extremely, all of the bigwig doctors love that article, the Welcome 5, the proximal origin of COVID control. You should watch out. With climate change now, you have to understand the same era. They looked forward at technology of the future, 1967, 1968, and they're like, let's implement loads of plans that we'd already drawn up because we'd already come to these conclusions back. So they're gaming it out in the CFR behind closed doors in the early 1950s. By the time it got to the late 60s, you had like Maurice Strong come into being, and he was running in all of these circles. He was running with like Ricklehouse or whoever they are. are, I can't remember what the last name is, who were up there with within the administration somewhere of Richard Nixon. And again, with the China model, that sort of thing is going at the same time, but they know that they needed to create something around that time. And obviously modeling was the new future. There's two things. There's with the WEF, you have 1973's World Economic Forum was the limits to growth. Aurelio Pecci was the keynote speaker and said the enemy of man is man itself. Yeah, and we need to reduce the population by 10% to 10% of what we currently are. So this sort of thing came at the same time that climate change agenda came into the world. I think we've seen how it plays. It plays through IBM, for instance, because a lot of those Malthusian plots of how population dynamics would work were created at the same time. While IBM were funding the first World Economic Forums, at the same time, they're creating the computer modeling with people at the Club of Rome, which show that this descent of man is on its way, and it's just predictable. You know that population is going to crash, so let's just accept it, and we're going to have to manage it. That's what we should do, manage it. And that is like a part of the computer modeling that was also then used, like the increase in the exponential increase in the technology allowed them then to create what is basically a climate virtue shield to institute policy that's about taking away land, because knowing what was in the future, they knew we would live in megacities, and knowing that we live in megacities means that to get to that stage and get to the future, you need to push everybody out of the countryside, because you can't supply the same technology to the people out there. Once technology gets to a certain level of advancement, it'd be best if you push them into cities. China has already started doing that, like 15 years ago. You've seen them just picking up farmers, throwing them into the back of a van, taking them out, saying, that's your flat, don't leave there. If you go back, you'll be beaten up and brought back here. So already, mega cities have sprung up in China because they don't have the same sort of like resistance as we have in the West. But we're heading towards the same model. We're heading towards like mega cities where they push us off the land. And so that's climate change has been used as an agenda for that. I mean, the same people who were in just to say, the Welcome 5 article, that looks at Roy Anderson, who basically invented pandemic modeling. If you're in control of the modeling, you can tell anybody anything, and you've got the evidence to prove it. That's what started off with the IBM stuff, with the computer modeling. And Roy Anderson also worked with IBM, and he later, everybody knows Neil Ferguson's name with COVID. That was Roy Anderson's apprentice. So you own the modeling, you own the world.
I feel like what we saw happen in 2020 with the lockdowns and the efforts to control us, that was almost like an experiment in like how effectively we can start breaking down the will of Americans. Because you're definitely correct. I was on X today, and so I saw someone commenting about some Canadian commenting about how she couldn't believe how many people are voting for Trump. And the response back was basically like, you guys voted for Trudeau. Like, you embrace authoritarianism. That is the antithesis of what American culture and mindset is. And I think that of all the peoples on the planet, I think Americans are probably the most stubborn about our freedoms, perhaps because the Constitution and Bill of Rights, but we're the most stubborn about seating in that portion. In fact, I think that MAGA is right, and the reason that those who identify as MAGA are being labeled as a threat to society, a threat to the health of society, and our own president is basically calling us treasonous, domestic terror threats. That I think that we're seeing that there's a recognition that Americans are stubborn about not allowing government to control us. And what is the most effective way to break us from that stubbornness, like a bronco that needs to be busted, and what steps and how far they have to go in order to assert the level of control that they want to assert over us based on some justified purported need that there's some sort of emergency that has to come into effect. And I think the WHO preparedness plan is certainly aligned with that. I was just wondering if you have thoughts on that.
Well, I think what you're describing there has been seen in history as this like natural sway. And when you talk about the Republicans and Democrats, they've had different qualities. Those qualities have kind of reversed in history at one point, but basically, it sways in and out. And what I think that all of these systems, these bigger overarching systems that were planned out many moons ago by people who are much like who are long gone now. Some of them just died this year. These overarching goals are the technologies of the future, the systems of the future, the things that we're meant to, the way that we're meant to do things. So all of these things are like a takeover. There's no more swaying. There's no more need to sway us. That's what they're saying. They're creating these sort of programs. They say you have to do it our way. There's no more swaying. You're now within the system, and if you're in the system there, you're more likely to capitulate to being in the system over here and over here. Now, how to keep you in the system, medical system, into this false paradigm that's been built up over COVID, is to probably do the same thing again and use that system of control as the way to enforce your edicts on all the countries of the world at the same time. So it's a step towards going from independent nation states to globalism. This is one of the big ones. That's what we're seeing.
Okay. Matthew Felty dropping the 20 here and saying, what are your thoughts on the Thomas Malthus overpopulation theory from the mid-1800s? Still being pushed today. Wasn't the big hole in that argument that he didn't anticipate farming improvements, food storage, freezer, and refrigerators?
Yeah, you didn't see that in your technology. So Malthus, who kind of saw the idea of overpopulation, and basically, eventually, if you have too many people, then everybody will be poor all the time and unhappy and ill-educated and all of this, and it reduces naturally as well. But then there'll be a population crash over times, and this has been seen before. And it's what we see now is like perversions of Malthus, and really a lot of this is they programmed themselves. The people who taught them have taught them that at some point, if you can bring that population down to a low enough reproduction rate, you'll see the population crash. If you do that when technology is at its height, you don't need people anymore. And so we're coming up to a point where the robots are going to take over most of our jobs, and we are useless eaters. So that is now. That is why Malthus and that sort of ideology works so well now, because this is the moment when it needs to be implemented.
You see, and it's an interesting thing because I cover politics a lot, and there's a theory that Tucker Carlson throws out there where he is fighting against innovation because of the concern that these innovations will have on various job markets. So, for example, if we wouldn't need truckers because we have self-driving trucks, in that case, he was saying that would be a disaster for the U.S. economy because it's the easiest job to train someone to do. You basically need to learn how to drive a truck, and you can feed your family, and that there just won't be jobs available for truckers if, in fact, we were able to eradicate them. And I happen to think that I disagree with Tucker on this thing, and I think that just because there won't be jobs as truckers, that theoretically would be true. Well, there also aren't jobs as toll booth operators anymore because of Easy Pass. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means that you find other work where they can help improve society in other ways and be beneficial in other ways without needing them to do specifically that task. And I think it's a very limited way of looking at how an economy is able to grow. No one's making typewriters anymore. That's not a problem. It's not like they kind of.
Oh no, there's a few connoisseur typewriter makers out
Okay,
there.
okay, but you understand what I'm saying. It used to be that it was like a multi-million, if not billion-dollar industry typewriters, and now you can't find one anymore. So it's not a bad thing, and the fact that there were typewriter manufacturing companies that had to close down is not a bad thing for society. Even though there were people working in those factories, they find other ways to become important pieces of society. So that's why I think it's a little bit of a limited thing. It's a limited perspective. And that's one of the reasons that you were just touching on that just now when you were describing, you were talking about how there's no need for people anymore once robots are able to do something. And I think there's a lot of things out there that the robots are never really going to be capable of doing.
There's a second layer to that, though, is because we're talking about robots and we're thinking about it the old-fashioned way, where you got Mr. Chunky armed robot picking up packages and putting it over here, or delivering our things by drones.
Right. Now you're picturing like real robots.
Yeah, but we're talking about AI at a level that will be in 10 years' time, bots full in chat rooms when nobody knows who's human and nobody knows.
You're talking about Terminator, basically. You're talking about Terminator, but not like the evil version of. But the point being that he's
before they make the robots, before they make those robots are mainly going to be fifth generation, used for fifth generation. They're going to be bots on the screen. They're going to look like you and I. They're going to talk like you and I. They're going to all have personalities indistinguishable from magic. Once technology becomes indistinguishable from magic, they can fool you with many things. And AI, artificial narrow intelligence, not even high up AI, once used in the most sophisticated way possible, is just going to leave us not knowing who's real or not. I'm saying in 10 years' time, there will be rooms full of bots who are actually look human, sound human, act human, all talking to each other and don't even know they're bots to each other. Like it's going to become really complicated. The amount of technology that can be used against us is all in the hands of the rich. So when Joe Biden took office, I think it's 175 million. You can write this in, type this in to check. 175 million IP addresses went on all at the same time, got transferred from the Department of Defense and over to some shady company outside. What the hell is that? That's a load of that's a load of messages coming into you, telling you from people who you think are real, constantly hitting you, bombarding you all of the time. That's videos being made in the future that you won't be able to tell are not real. That's fifth generation warfare going off. So that is going to be serious. And the positive side of it has to be look local. Remember that the virtual world can still be a virtual world. It's you have to take everything with a pinch of salt. The people who are in your life, those are the people you got to look forward to being with and like take care of. That's the fundamentals to keep yourself human, and you've got to try and form a different vision of society to what they want. So they want a society that's really in borders and everything works in a way that probably Hitler would like. So let's like find that little bit, like in Demolition Man, you get a little bit dirty, you get a little bit clean, meet in the middle, like live in perfect harmony and all of that. But that's really what it comes down to, is we've got to have a dog in the fight. We don't have a dog in the fight. So Klaus Schwab, his introduction meant the introduction of stakeholder capitalism that leaves us within what is essentially a communist system, all of the money at the top, all the say at the top, and us all completely equal drones having to go along with whatever system has been decided, because we think we've got purchase, but our new masters are mayors of megacities. That's how it'll work.
Zachary Sweet says, ask him what the leverage is. There has to be something that they hold over the heads of others, or else it would all point to one leader.
It would all. What do you mean by that? Asking what leverage should be something. I think they all got all sorts of leverage. I think intelligence agencies are kind of like used in a way that become these like viral agents that pop in and out of where they're needed to maintain the system and the status quo. And then you got things like the FBI and the Justice Department in America that then run along different lines and do the same. And these systems evolve over time in a way that they all hold sway over each other, and they all use the same sort of compromise, whether that be actual compromise of someone taking a video recording of someone or a picture of someone, or just the fact that you know a bit of information about someone, or you can suggest something to someone and you know their situation, you can make their situation bad and give them an offer at the right time. Those sort of things are the influence that even the most benign of services use to get you to do stuff. And when what you see, one of the things I'd say, the Milgram experiment, where like 66% of people would go all the way and kill someone just because they want to defer their responsibility over to a
You
scientist.
can't just throw out
in the
Milgram
corner of the room.
experiment and assume that most people here know what that is. The Milgram experiment was basically that was the experiment where they had someone in a room who was supposed to shock someone, and the shocks would increase in intensity, and then eventually, they would hear from the other room someone screaming.
They're asking questions to the other person, and if they answer it wrong, then they get shocked, and then the shock goes up. In actual fact, it got to a point where it says on the dial danger and stuff, and all you got is a scientist in the corner of the room in a white coat. You think he's a scientist, and all he's going to say to you is, no, the experiment, the experiment means you should continue, or wants you to continue. And so
he would hear every time he switched it up. The subject.
Oh my God!
Oh God! Please stop! Like screaming louder and louder until when he's zapping him, then he hears nothing. And
that's 66% of people fail and will kill the person behind to give them a lethal voltage, even with the complaining happening, just because they defer their responsibility and accountability over to someone in a lab coat, who represents someone in authority. Now, that's under basic pressure. You're in a room with a guy in a lab coat. That's basic pressure. Once you put on lockdown, once you put on the threat of death upon you, once you put down that you could spread pandemic to everybody, you could spread the virus to everybody, you should wear a mask, once you put all of the TV telling you the same thing, the radio telling you the same thing, friends in your park shouting at you because you not wearing a mask in an open space, once you got into that situation, once you have to show ID to get into a shop like we had to in Chile, it's like you go into a situation where you're like, Milgram experiment is simple, 66%. Real world situational pressure of something like the WHO can put on you is like 95%. That's scary as hell. That is always one step away from genocide somewhere in there. We're always going to get to the point of genocide somewhere. If you could put on that sort of pressure and people just go that easily, and yet we know from being described these things about this, why aren't we taught this? Why aren't we, why isn't our own humanity and the weakness of humanity obvious to us and been taught to us throughout our life? Why has all that been taken out? Well, it was all got taken out of the curriculum around the same time by the same people who all want to dumb us down, take away logic, take away reason. It's a plan so that we have a dumbed down society, and they have all of those principles that were discussed in Greece and in Rome back in the day. We've got a depleted knowledge.
I just want to pause for a second here. I'm watching the chat, and I'm seeing this one guy in my chat, Lars Larson, who watches fairly regularly, is all bothered by the fact that I said truckers could be trained to do something else. And he's saying, what can they be trained? What can they be trained to? What can they be trained to? And what I'm saying, my point is this: if there's no need for people to do trucking, there are an infinite number of ways that society can be improved if we had available manpower to dedicate toward it. We could be doing landscaping on our highways. Between that goes completely, that things grow completely unfettered. Things that you don't have to have now are not needs. But I'm saying is it's something like if you're so desperate to try and find something for people to do, that I just came up with that off the top of my head. But there's literally thousands of different things that
you
people
sound
could do
like
to make
Herman
society
Kahn.
better.
You sound like Herman Kahn. You sound like Herman Kahn after the Club of Rome spoke at the World Economic Forum, and he was devastated by the whole Club of Rome limits to growth speech and the idea of depopulation. And he said he changed his whole way. He changed his whole way from working with the government. He said, no, we don't need to do that. We don't need to depopulate, because in 200 years, we'll be able, over the next 200 years, we'll be able to get off the planet. We'll be able to go onto meteors, get all the resources we need. We won't have a limit to our growth. We are we're ingenious. We can do this if we know what's coming, and we know what's coming if we limit ourselves and we don't destroy ourselves. And there's lots of possibilities for someone who's a truck driver to suddenly find that they are something more positive. But there's also the chance that in a society that we've got right now, by the people who control us right now, the most likely thing you become when they get rid of all these jobs is meat for the war grinder. That's the most likely thing that they will make you.
I don't buy that. I'm just telling you, I personally don't buy that. I'm not saying. Look, that's my personal opinion. Is I disagree with that. I think that there's an infinite number of different potential jobs out there. Things that are not jobs today. And I'm not saying you have to go out into outer space. What I'm saying is, maybe that's an answer he came up with, but that's a poor man's answer. Instead, we've had developments in food where you can basically grow things in tighter areas. There's a lot of different ways that we don't know what the heck society is going to be 5 years from now. You're speculating. And perhaps, logically so, based on our current projection rate and how things are increasing rapidly, exponentially, that within 10 years, we're going to have so much AI robots walking around here. You're never going to know who's human and who's a bot.
I don't know about the walking around. Because
and you know what?
I think the fifth generation warfare will be bad.
That could be true. And if that is true, they almost certainly will need maintenance. And that's what I'm saying is
they can maintain each other.
Okay. What I'm saying
Scratch
is
each other's backs.
Okay, so you're right. Because I can't tell you what jobs are going to be needed 10 years from now. So that means there's no jobs. Like it's that you can't tell me what developments are going to be 10 years from now, but I tell you how we can fix the problems that come from those developments that neither of us know for sure are going to be here. That's what I'm saying. Is that we have to stop living in fear of development. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be cognizant of the morality of what steps we're taking. I'm simply saying that we shouldn't do it because we have to worry about somebody having a job. I think is a poor way of analyzing how a society can develop in a very healthy way.
You're defining the logical fallacy, and a lot of people don't necessarily have the knowledge from their schooling to be able to define logical fallacies. It's one of the things we're talking about here is that you don't, and that brings up its own problems, because to defend for the negative of what could happen, we need to be prepared, but we're not being prepared for that on purpose, so that they'll always be in control of crises and they can create crises. So we have at the moment, whatever happens, you can only have your positive outcome and the more positive look on things if you sort out the systemic problems, because otherwise it's just going to be the cycle of a controlled revolution every however long.
Well, I mean, okay. Truckers can learn to code with the coal miners.
Learn to code. My God.
See, this is a fallacious argument right here. This is a fallacious argument. So because someone came up with some stupid way of phrasing what I'm saying, so now you're trying to twist what I'm saying into claiming that I'm saying that truckers can learn to code. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the same type of manual labor that is available in the form of trucking. There's an infinite number of manual labor potential jobs out there. And that's my point. Not that they can learn to code. So.
No, OnlyFans is more likely, isn't it?
No.
I'm only playing. No, OnlyFans. I reckon trucker OnlyFans one day, man. Don't.
Well, let me tell you, you could make a killing on OnlyFans. Allegan News says drowning rats experiment is what the COVID lockdowns did. They primed us to have hope even when they take our rights. I don't know. I'm not familiar with something called the drowning rats experiment. I'm not sure if that's an actual reference to something or I'm not sure exactly what Allegan's point is. I don't know if you know something about some experiment of that name. You can.
The one I'm thinking of is the one where was it? Oh no, that's cannabis. Where they give the rats a little bit of THC, and then they can't find the platform. Right. But they're young rats. You shouldn't give young rats cannabis. That's what
there you go. That's the lesson you should learn today. Never give a young rat cannabis. Zachary says, do you think there's someone directing the plan or multiple people? There has to be planning and direction towards the globalist goal.
Yeah, you can find the people.
There has to be a cabal. There has to be a cabal of a group of people. I can't believe there's one mastermind behind it all. Dr. Evil. I don't believe that that's it. I think that there's a cabal. And there might be one dominant voice in the cabal. but there has to be some sort of cabal that's happening there. I want
think
to
the
talk about
cabal
your.
was the past, though, and it's like we're still enacting the stuff of dead people. That's why we can't ever get purchase on who is behind it, because it's the dreams of dead men.
Could be. I want to talk about your website because I pulled it up here, and I want you to help my audience walk through it.
All right, baby.
So maybe you can help me because I'm looking at it and I'm not going to kid you. I'm like a little confused. And I
Oh,
want
right. Yeah. No. You can
when
go
they're
to
looking at it. When they're looking at it, I want them to know what they're looking at here. So maybe you can walk us through what these different.
go to newspaste.com. So you see how
This is
Johnny.
This is Johnny.
This is JohnnyVedmore.com. So this is basically every time I have a release, it'll come up in a block. Up in the top, there's a menu with a drop down.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't see that menu. So maybe
just up on yeah. But if you put in newspaste.com, I gotta change that site now. Look at you.
I'm trying to help you.
My main site is newspaste.com, and that's where I.
Oh, that's a little bit easier to.
So. You got a search bar right at the top. You can support me with stuff at the top. Now, here you've got searching for Stanley documentary. Underneath, you'll see.
Where am I going?
So you see Gloria Steinem, Kent State Massacre, and Watergate. That's basically 3 episodes of what's called Searching for Stanley, which is underneath. You'll see Pottinger Identity, Pottinger Supremacy, and Pottinger Ultimatum. They're articles. Underneath are the read-throughs of each of those articles. And that goes through the life of John Stanley Pottinger. The first series of the Pottinger Identity is out, and that is basically the first article segmented up into 22-minute slots. And these read-throughs are basically the long articles that I write, often about 7,500 words, and I do a long read throughs, including about Junkermann there. That's a third of the Junkermann articles. There's the rest of the Searching for Stanley documentaries there. They'll link you through to each part. I wrote the soundtrack to that as well. Very mean. I did all the editing. I did everything. That's my most recent article in UK Column, which was about Pablo Miller, who was involved with Christopher Steele and was the handler for Sergei Skripal and others. A really interesting figure, one of the biggest spies throughout history. That's the Schwab trilogy there. So Schwab Family Values, about Schwab's history, Schwab's CFR and CIA training, and then Kissinger Continuum, about the forming of the CIA and the people behind the CIA.
I'm clicking on this so I can just sort of get a feel for it.
So that'll take you to Unlimited Hangout for Schwab Family Values at the moment. But it's also on the site as well. And then they got the Newspace podcast. I do some spaces as well, which is
so this is a space that what is Ministry of Proof? What is that?
Ministry of Proof. Me and Josh Halkin has started a little space where basically we go with some of the best medical doctors. The last time we had what's his I can't remember his name at all. That's a bad boy. Dennis Rancourt, who's a big climatologist. He knows a lot about the falsities behind climate change, and a lot of the people who are basically involved in COVID, the resistance to COVID, big doctors.
There's no medical advice on this show. I'm not a doctor. He's not a doctor.
No.
There's no medical advice. Okay, I don't even know why you're sitting there and you're like, oh, let me take down notes here. As Dr. Joe Neerman is going to say, I'm not a doctor. I've never been a doctor. And he's not a doctor. There's no medical advice here.
I'm a doctor of love.
I happen to love this name, though. Resist the Soviet Union. That's very cool.
Yeah. Someone made that up for me. It's very nice. But basically, the site is full of loads of different things, loads of articles.
This thing is jam-packed.
I got loads of shows.
You could binge watch this for a few weeks here.
Yeah, I'm on Rumble and Rockfin and stuff. And with each article I make, I also do a run through of all the source material that's in the article, so you can see each source that I'm using and why I'm using it. I try and do that with all that's really what Newshound is, which is I go through. Sometimes I just go through history. It's it's really interesting to go through the newspaper archives and some source material about things.
What is Fungi Monkey?
Oh, this was my old platform just before I created Newspaste. I was doing Fungi Monkey, which was really, really. It was a good name, but I wanted to do some other
It
stuff.
was too closely linked to monkeypox, so
yeah. But the news hounds are pretty good, and basically the whole site is got loads of articles on it. I mean,
I see.
It
It just goes
is.
on and on and on and on. You can
that's the training up there, the World Economic Forum training, just above there. So that's like half an hour to an hour for each of the actual slides of the World Economic Forum. You can see what they're like. It's honestly completely unbelievable. Oh, I don't know what's happened there.
Yeah, I don't know what I did something wrong. That was on me. That's on me.
You did wrong.
I did do something wrong. I did something
and
very
that's JohnnyVedmore.com where I do the posts up separately. So this is where
right.
I do the posts.
Newspace is where you want to be, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I was looking. Let me try. Here we go.
Yeah. Sorry, you'd have to go.
See, I told you he's got the writing on the wall, the red string going on here.
This is me. This is the World Economic Forum. This is the World Economic Forum's own training slide from their Flickr account. And if you're just seeing a tiny little bit of it. That's just the cover of the video. But if I go through the video, I go through each piece of each of the slides, and we learn a lot about there's each of those.
The next slide.
Oh, I see. Oh, this is so cool.
Yeah. So then, if you slide through, then it'll let you see some of that sexy slides.
Nice.
Oh yeah, there's power of persuasion. Go quite far to the end, and you'll see. Yeah, by there. Here we go. This is their own slides. Manipulation. Facts don't matter. There is a science to manipulation. There are techniques. Empathy. Zero. They got nothing about empathy on there. These are their own training slides from their own stuff. It's insane. If you actually look at that, they're telling you their plan, and they're telling you how they do their plan. It's insane.
Wow. That's so wild.
Yeah,
right.
I got their crazy evidence boards. That's how deep I've gone.
That's great. All right, so let me get to a couple last chats here before we get this over here. Allegan says, "Check your locals, Joe. I posted it on the board. You posted it. Let me check what Allegan's talking about here. Check my locals. He posted on the board. The drowning rat psychology experiment, resilience of the power of hope." In the 1950s, Kurt Richter, a professor at Johns Hopkins, did a famous drowning rat psychology experiment. The experiment, though cruel, demonstrated the power of hope and resilience in overcoming difficult situations. That's what the lockdowns did. They primed us for future giving up of our liberties. All right.
I wonder where Karl Hector was from.
What's the show sauce? Joe, you're overacting. He's saying 60% hypothesis and 40% dry. SOH? I don't know what SOH stands for.
It's a Celt thing.
It's a Celt thing. Okay. And Pam says, science has become political science. Science and math are so hard, but so is being a concrete Mason. Political science won't teach anyone how to survive. And I feel very uncomfortable with you sending me the super chat, considering a tweet that I sent out right before the show started. And in case any of you saw it, it was a reply to the Palm lawyer, where she basically I know people are going to take it the wrong way. But basically, I wrote something which was 95% a joke, but it was she. No, it was 100% a joke. 100% a joke. 100% a joke. 110% a joke. Basically I'll share it with you and get it out of the way, because someone's gonna be mad at me for this. Oh yeah, so Political Palm, that's what her name is. She basically asked this. Look at this super chat in the context of what I'm about to show you here. So she sent out this thing. Why does mansplaining exist? Why do men try to mansplain to me? Is it biological? Please mansplain in the comments. So I explained to her that testes enable humans to more easily digest math, science, and common sense, Women are better at other things. Breastfeeding and designing floral arrangements are gifts of the uterus. They are. They're gifts of the. So in case anyone missed the joke, in case anyone missed it, it's designed to be. She said, "Please mansplain" in the comments. So that was like the best mansplaining I could possibly come up with. That's why I thought it was funny that you say science and math are so hard, but so is being a concrete mason, political science. So is being a concrete mason. Political science won't teach anyone how to survive. That's true. Learn a skill. Learn a skill. I'm a very big believer in learning actual trade rather than just thought experiments in a college. Everyone says, "What do you mean there has to be a cabal, Joe? They're meeting right now in Davos, Joe." That's what I mean. But I'm saying is, even in Davos, I'm sure there are some people who are considered more central to Davos, like Klaus Schwab, and those who are like the latchers on, like Justin Trudeau. So yeah, that's what I meant by that. And Jesus Freak says, "I'm a traditional Catholic. The Vatican captured."
True enough. True so. True so.
What does that mean?
Well, they're in league with the World Economic Forum all the way. I mean, on those trading slides that you were looking at earlier, there's some where it's just like they're dancing around with the Pope because they've already got him involved, and the Pope is well down with the World Economic Forum stuff. The combining of the church, it seems to be. There's a lot of Catholics who don't like this Pope at all. The Jesuit, they don't like him, and they don't like the direction he's taking the church in, and he's heading towards the fourth industrial revolution. Skipping, it's dodgy.
All right. So Worcestershire Sauce is explaining that SOH that she wrote over here, Joe, you're out. He's 60% hypothesis and 40% dry sense of humor. That's what she was saying. That's what she was saying there. All right. So we're gonna wrap up over here. So tell people where they can find you, in case they. I'm gonna put in your news paste thing, and I put in your Johnny Vedmore site in the description in case anyone wants to.
I need to work on johnnyvedmore.com.
But I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna put in newspaste.com also, so this way.
Yeah, definitely the place to find me at the moment. And most of the work, especially the most current, and it's updated really regularly. And newspaste.com is the place to go, and you can buy me a coffee or become a patron. You'll get loads of extras and the like. I'm also extremely interactive, so I'm on X. I don't like calling it X still. No, I'm on X. No,
it sounds so stupid when you say I'm on X. I mean, think about what you're at. It sounds like the stupidest thing in the world. I don't know.
So I'm on Twitter. I'm on what was the artist formerly known as Twitter.
Yes.
And people can, and my DM's open. You can actually talk to me. I'm a very interactive person, so I like interacting. And so come view my stuff. I write long form articles, but I also do lots of documentaries. I do lots of read throughs, run throughs. I do appear on people's shows all the time. I try and be diverse. I also do police auditing, so I go out onto the streets and I cause trouble as well with a camera, and just have fun.
All right. Well, I thank you so much for joining me, Johnny. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure hearing your perspectives on things, and I know that there's a font of information. I probably could have spent like another hour and a half drilling you more, but I just wanted to get like an overview from you about background on each of these two nefarious individuals. And you were great. You were entertaining. You were like just spitting it out there. So you guys make sure you check him out, Johnny Vedmore on Twitter, Johnny Vedmore, or johnnyvedmore.com or newspace.com. And I'll be back here, God willing, tomorrow. Tomorrow I also plan on doing a show on locals. That's a goodlogic.locals.com. In case I might have stuttered there. So it's goodlogic.locals.com. Have you heard of goodlogic.locals.com? Because it's called goodlogic.locals.com. That's what it's called. Goodlogic.locals.
Goodlogic.
There you go.
I got it. It's in my head.
There you go.
I'm a genius.
Yeah. All right. So there you go. I thank you all for joining me. I'm going to kick you on over to my good friend Nick Ricada, because that's just the power that I have, and why shouldn't I share the love with others? So let me just make sure he's actually is streaming. All right, it's got an early short stream. I don't know what that means, but yeah. So that's it. I thank you all for joining me, John. If you could just stick around for a second, I'll say my goodbyes to you. I will see you all local tomorrow, and then tomorrow evening at 10 p.m. Till then, make sure that no matter what you do, stay happy, eat the bugs, and as always, Godspeed.